For years, Portugal's non-habitual resident regime, the NHR, it felt a bit like the golden ticket for people living internationally looking to be smart about taxes.
It really did have that reputation, didn't it?
But things are changing, and that final chance for new people to apply is closing fast.
Yeah.
So understanding what it was and what's happening now seems pretty crucial. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission really is to unpack this NHR thing. What were the benefits? What were the maybe downsides or limitations?
Exactly.
And most importantly, guide you through what it was, who it helped, and crucially, those final steps for anyone who might still be able to squeak in under the transitional rules.
Yeah, that deadline is key.
We're pulling this all from various articles and expert takes you've shared, trying to give the clearest possible picture.
Sounds good.
So let's start right at the beginning. NHR status.
Yeah.
We hear it called a special tax residency program. What did that actually mean in practice?
Well, you're right. It was a special program. Portugal set it up back in 2009, and the whole idea really was to be a magnet, attract foreign talent, investment, retirees.
By giving them tax breaks.
Exactly. Significant tax breaks. For people who qualified, it often meant paying basically zero Portuguese tax on most of their income coming from outside Portugal.
Wow, zero.
For up to 10 years, which compared to Portugal's normal progressive tax rates, which can get quite high, was, it was a massive difference.
0% on most foreign earnings. That sounds, frankly, almost too good to be true. What kind of income are we talking about here? Like salaries earned abroad?
Yeah.
Dividends?
Yeah, pretty much all of those. The NHR status offered really compelling exemptions for a whole range of foreign-sourced income. Things like salaries paid by a foreign company, dividends from foreign assets, even rent from property outside Portugal.
Okay.
The general rule was if that income could be taxed in the source country under a tax treaty, or if it was taxed there, then Portugal wouldn't tax it again.
So avoiding double taxation was key.
Absolutely. Now, there was a tweak for foreign pensions. Initially, they were also zero tax, which was huge for retirees. But after 2020, due to some pressure, that changed to a flat 10% tax in Portugal.
Still pretty good compared to many places, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. And there was another piece. Certain high-value professionals, even if they were earning income inside Portugal, could get a special flat rate of 20% on that income instead of the higher standard rates.
Right. We'll probably touch on those high-value jobs later. So even with the 10% on pensions, it was a major draw. But I know the big news is that the standard NHR regime is ending. What's the absolute critical info for someone listening now?
This is, probably the most urgent point. The original NHR regime, it officially closed its doors to new applicants from the start of 2024.
Okay, so it's done for newcomers.
Mostly, yes. But there's this vital transitional window. If you meet some very specific conditions, basically, you have to prove you had already taken concrete steps to move to Portugal by late 2023.
Like signing a work contract or a lease?
Exactly. Things like a signed job contract by December 31st, 2023, or maybe a property purchase or rental agreement signed by October 10th, 2023, or having applied for a relevant visa by the end of 2023. If you tick one of those boxes and became resident in 2024, you can still apply for NHR.
And you still get the full benefits.
Yes, the full 10 years. But, and this is the crucial bit, the absolute final deadline to get that application in is March 31st, 2025.
March 31st, 2025.
Ah.
And people who already have NHR.
They're fine. Existing beneficiaries keep their benefits for their full 10-year term. No change for them.
Okay, good to clarify. All of this really underscores why Portugal became such a hotspot, didn't it? For retirees, professionals, investors, it often got compared to Spain's Beckham Law.
It did, yeah. Similar concept, different mechanics, which maybe we can explore later.
Definitely. But first, let's shift gears slightly. Who exactly was this golden ticket for? When you look at the people who actually used NHR, who benefited the most?
It's interesting because the appeal was quite broad, but certain groups definitely saw outsized benefits. Retirees and pensioners were clearly a massive segment.
Because of the pension tax rate.
Absolutely. That ability to move to Portugal and pay just 10% tax on your foreign pension, that was a game changer. And remember, before 2020, it was 0%. Plus, due to tax treaties, if the pension was already taxed back home, it often meant effectively zero tax in Portugal.
Right. Even at 10%, that's a huge saving for many.
A very significant saving. Though, as I said, that shift from 0% to 10% in 2020 happened partly because other EU countries weren't too happy about the 0% rate.
Understandable. Okay, so retirees were big. What about, say, foreign professionals or the self-employed? the digital nomad crowd.
Yeah, they were another key group. If they were in specific high-value added fields, the government had this list.
That list again.
Exactly. Engineers, doctors, certain types of teachers, scientists, artists, IT professionals. If your job was on that list, you could get that flat 20% tax rate on your qualifying income, whether it was earned in Portugal or abroad from self-employment or employment.
Which is much lower than standard Portuguese rates.
Significantly lower. So yes, very attractive for remote workers and digital nomads in those specific fields. That list was crucial.
Okay. And for investors or business owners, what was the draw there?
Passive income was a huge win. Generally speaking, things like dividends, interest, and royalties coming from outside Portugal were exempt from tax under NHR.
Completely exempt.
Usually, yes, under the treaty rules. And capital gains on foreign assets, like selling shares you held abroad, were often tax-free in Portugal too, again, depending on the specific double tax treaty. So very appealing for high net worth individuals, people with investment portfolios.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned capital gains. What about the newer stuff like crypto? How did NHR handle cryptocurrency gains? That's a hot topic.
It is, and Portugal's stance on crypto has evolved. Under NHR, though, crypto gains were generally treated like other capital gains. The really key point was, if you held your crypto assets for more than 365 days, any gain when you sold them was typically exempt from tax in Portugal.
Tax-free for long-term holds.
Yes, aligning with the general Portuguese rule for capital gains at the time. Short-term gains, if you held for less than a year, were taxed usually at 28%. But for long-term holders, NHR could be very beneficial for crypto.
Interesting. And it wasn't tied to just one specific visa, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Could people on different visas apply for NHR?
That's right. It wasn't linked to, say, just the golden visa. Any foreigner who obtained legal residency in Portugal could potentially apply, or even Portuguese citizens coming back after 5 or more years abroad.
So EU citizens.
EU, EEA, Swiss nationals, they have residency rights, so they could apply once registered. For non-EU nationals, they needed a visa first, maybe the golden visa or the D7 passive income visa or the D8 digital nomad visa, which became quite popular.
So lots of routes in.
Yes, the main things were getting legal residency and meeting that crucial condition. You couldn't have been a Portuguese tax resident in the 5 years before you applied.
Okay, the 5-year rule. Got it. Right, this is where it's really interesting for people. Beyond just saying tax breaks, what were the actual tangible perks? If someone was considering NHR, what were the big selling points?
Well, the benefits were pretty comprehensive. First off, the status itself lasted for 10 years. 10 continuous years, once granted.
That's a long time.
It is. It provides significant certainty for planning. Then, the headline act, as we discussed, was the foreign income exemption. Most income sourced outside Portugal, wages, rent, dividends, interest, capital gains, was often not taxed in Portugal.
Provided it could be taxed elsewhere.
Exactly. If the double tax treaty allowed the source country to tax it, or if it was taxed there, Portugal wouldn't tax it again. That was the core mechanism preventing double taxation and often resulting in zero tax here.
So many people paid little or no Portuguese tax on their foreign earnings. What about money earned inside Portugal? Any breaks there?
Yes, that's the other side of the coin. For those specific high-value jobs we mentioned, performed in Portugal, the income tax rate was capped at a flat 20%.
Instead of the usual, potentially much higher, progressive rates.
Correct. Standard rates could climb towards, nearly 48%. So 20% was a very substantial reduction for qualifying professions like scientists, certain artists, tech roles.
And the pensions.
And the pensions, yes. Non-Portuguese pensions taxed at that flat 10% rate after 2020. Still very favorable for many.
Now, I know Portugal doesn't have a wealth tax, and inheritance tax between close family is minimal. Were those NHR benefits specifically?
That's a really important distinction to make. No, those aren't NHR benefits per se. Portugal's lack of a general wealth tax and the fact that inheritance or gifts between spouses, parents, and children are exempt from inheritance tax, just subject to a small stamp duty, well, those apply to all residents in Portugal.
Okay, so general Portuguese tax features.
Exactly. But they certainly complemented the NHR advantages, making the overall financial picture even more attractive, especially for estate planning. NHR also meant you could bring foreign income into Portugal. Tax-free remittance wasn't taxed, and Portugal's huge network of tax treaties, around 80 of them, was vital in making the whole system work to avoid double taxation.
Okay, so a powerful package of benefits, which leads to the big question for anyone still eligible. How did you actually get this status? What were the hoops to jump through?
Right, the practicalities. The absolute first step was becoming a Portuguese tax resident.
How do you do that? Just live there.
Pretty much. The main test is spending 183 days or more in Portugal within a calendar year. That usually automatically makes you tax resident for that year.
And if you spend less than 183 days?
There's an alternative. If you have a place that you intend to be your permanent home in Portugal by December 31st of the given year, like you've bought a house, or you have a 12-month rental agreement that can also establish tax residency for that year, even if you spent less than 183 days there, it shows your intent.
Okay, so establish residency. Then what?
Then comes that critical 5-year rule we mentioned. You had to declare, formally, that you had not been a tax resident in Portugal for any of the previous 5 years.
A self-declaration.
Yes, a sworn declaration as part of the online application. You also needed, of course, the legal right to reside in Portugal. For you E-Swiss citizens, that's more straightforward. For non-EU citizens, it meant first getting your residence permit or visa, the golden visa, D7, D8, whatever it was.
And this brings us back to that crucial point for people aiming for the March 2025 deadline,
Yeah.
the transitional rules. What exactly does someone need to show for that specific path?
This is super important and honestly a bit complex. So the original NHR is closed to new people from 2024 onwards. However, this transitional rule allows someone who became a tax resident in 2024 to still apply if they can prove they initiated their move before the end of 2023 based on specific criteria.
Okay, what are those criteria again?
You need evidence of one of these things. A signed employment contract or promise of one to work in Portugal, dated by December 31st, 2023, or a signed lease agreement or agreement to buy property in Portugal, dated by October 10th, 2023, or having applied for a residence visa or permit by December 31st, 2023, or having a child enrolled in a Portuguese school for the 23-50-24 year.
So, concrete steps taken in late 2023.
Exactly. If you meet one of those conditions and you officially became a tax resident during 2024, you can still apply for the NHR status. But again, that application absolutely must be submitted by March 31st, 2025.
That date is burned into my brain now.
Yeah.
So, assuming someone qualifies, how do they actually do the application, step by step?
Right. Once you've sorted your residency, maybe register at the local council, Camera Municipal if you're EU, or got your visa sorted if non-EU, your next step is getting your NIF. That's your Portuguese tax ID number. You get that from the local tax office Finanças.
Okay, got the NIF.
Then you need to officially register as a tax resident with Finanças. You can often do this online through their portal, Portal das Finanças, or go in person. Then, slightly tricky part, you need access to that online portal.
How do you get that?
You register for an account online, but they physically mail a password to your registered Portuguese address. This can take a few days, sometimes a week or two, so you need to factor that delay in. Don't leave it till the last minute.
Good tip. Password received, logged in. Now what?
Okay, once you're in the Portal das Finanças, you navigate to the section for applying for NHR status. It's usually under something like register or submit application, and then searching for a residente non-habitual. You fill out the request, it pulls in your details. The key part is ticking the box where you declare you haven't been resident for the past 5 years.
That's sworn declaration.
Precisely. You submit the application. It's crucial to take a screenshot or save the confirmation page immediately as proof you submitted it. Then you wait. Usually within a few business days, you can log back in, check the status under consult requests, or similar. If it says deferido, that means granted.
And you get a certificate.
Yes, you can then download an official PDF certificate confirming your NHR status and the start date. Keep that safe.
Sounds like a process.
Well,
What's the quick checklist of documents someone needs ready?
essentially, your passport or national ID card, your Portuguese NUF number, proof of your Portuguese address like that rental contract or utility bill. If you're non-EU, your residence permit or visa details. You'll need to state your previous country of tax residence, but usually you don't need to proactively submit a certificate of non-residence from there. The declaration is the main thing.
And the portal password.
And definitely factor in time for that portal password. My absolute top advice on timing: apply as early as you possibly can. Do not wait until mid-March 2025 if you qualify under the transitional rules. The portal gets incredibly busy near deadlines, things can crash, delays happen. That March 31st, 2025 deadline is final. Miss it, and the opportunity is gone forever.
Okay, crystal clear on the deadline. Now, let's say someone successfully got NHR status, maybe years ago, or maybe they just squeezed in. What happens after approval? What are the ongoing obligations, and what are the common traps people fall into?
Right, getting the status is one thing, living with it correctly is another. First, taxes. NHR holders still have to file a Portuguese tax return every year, just like any other resident.
Even if their foreign income is taxed at 0%.
Yes, you have to declare your worldwide income. There's a specific annex to the tax form, Annexo L, where you detail all your foreign income sources. The income that qualifies for the NHR exemption is reported there, and while it's declared, the tax rate applied by the system should be 0% for most categories. But you must declare it.
Okay, file taxes, declare everything. What about Social Security? Does NHR cover that?
This is probably the single biggest misunderstanding. No. NHR is only an income tax regime. It has absolutely no impact on Portuguese Social Security contributions.
Really? So if you work,
If you're employed by a Portuguese company, Social Security is deducted as normal. If you're self-employed, a Recibo Verde issuer, for example, you are liable for Portuguese Social Security contributions after an initial 12-month exemption period for newly registered self-employed.
and how much is that?
It varies, but it's roughly calculated on 70% of your invoiced income, and the rate is around 21.4%. So it's a significant cost that NHR does not waive. Many, many expats get caught out by this, thinking NHR covers everything. It doesn't.
That's a huge clarification. Okay, so income tax sorted, Social Security payable. What about other general taxes? Property tax.
Regular Portuguese taxes still apply where relevant. Portugal doesn't have a wealth tax, as we said, but it does have annual property tax called IMI, which NHR holders pay just like everyone else on Portuguese property they own. And if you sell Portuguese real estate, you'll generally pay capital gains tax on the profit at standard rates. NHR doesn't exempt income or gains sourced in Portugal. Only specific high-value income gets the 20% rate.
And double tax relief.
Still crucial. If you do end up paying some tax abroad on income that Portugal might also tax, though NHR minimizes this, you need to claim credits under the relevant double tax treaty on your Portuguese return to avoid paying twice. Now, let's talk pitfalls and insights. A really common one was misunderstanding which foreign income was truly exempt. It wasn't automatic for all income.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. Think about John, a hypothetical British teacher. He moves to Portugal, continues working remotely for his UK school. He assumes his UK salary is tax-free in Portugal under NHR, but teaching wasn't on that specific list of high-value added activities.
The list again.
The list again. So Portugal considered his UK salary fully taxable under its standard rates. He'd then have to try and claim tax relief back in the UK. It highlights that the high-value list wasn't just a guideline, it was a strict feature. Your job had to be on it for certain benefits, especially a 20% rate, to apply. Which leads directly to the next point. Get professional advice. Seriously, NHR rules, the interaction with double tax treaties defining income sources, it's complex. A good local tax advisor or lawyer who understands NHR inside out is invaluable. They can tell you before you move how your specific income streams will likely be treated. As one advisor often says, Portugal wants to tax residents from day one. Don't wing it.
Sound advice. What else?
Watch that 183-day rule for residency carefully. Keep track of your days if you travel a lot. If you're relying on the permanent home rule instead of days, make sure your documentation, lease, deed, is solid and clearly indicates your intent by year end.
And the Social Security point again.
Cannot stress it enough. NHR does not mean no Social Security if you're working or self-employed in Portugal. Budget for it. Also, simple admin. Make sure your details on the finances portal, your name spelling, NI or LAM address are perfect. Any discrepancy can cause delays or rejection of applications. And yes, deadline diligence. I know we've hammered it, but missing that March 31st deadline is fatal for transitional applicants. And stay alert to rule changes. NHR is being phased out. There's a new, different incentive focused on research and development talent, the IFSI, coming for people moving from 2025 onwards. The landscape keeps shifting. It's also worth remembering the context NHR was partly ended due to concerns about rising housing costs, although studies suggest NHR holders weren't the main driver of that. Let's consider Janice, a hypothetical U.S. SEO consultant. She moves to Portugal with NHR, planning to continue her U.S. consulting work. If she just invoices directly as a freelancer, her income might not qualify for the 20% rate if SEO consultant isn't on the magic list, and it could be taxed at standard rates. However, if before moving she had set up a U.S. LLC, paid herself a salary taxed in the U.S., and perhaps taken profits as dividends, those dividends might have been fully tax-exempt in Portugal under NHR.
Wow, so the structure matters hugely.
Absolutely. It's not just what you earn, but how it's structured legally, and when you set up that structure, ideally before becoming resident. It could be the difference between 0% tax and potentially 48%. Preparation is tax critical. And just to loop back on retirees, even with the 10% pension tax, for many, especially from higher tax countries, the net income they received in Portugal was still significantly higher.
That's a fascinating point about structure and timing. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. How did NHR compare to similar schemes elsewhere? Spain's Beckham Law is often mentioned.
Yeah, it's a good comparison because they aimed for similar goals, attracting foreigners, but worked quite differently. Spain's Beckham Law, broadly, lets qualifying foreigners pay a flat 24% tax on their Spanish income, up to a cap, 600K, for about 6 years. Most foreign income is exempt, so it's really good if you're employed in Spain by a Spanish company.
Okay, focuses on Spanish earnings.
Primarily. Portugal's NHR, the old regime we've been discussing, was almost the opposite in focus. It offered up to 10 years of breaks, mainly by exempting most foreign source income entirely, and it capped some Portuguese source income at 20% for those high-value jobs. So NHR was often better if your main income came from outside Portugal pensions, investments, certain remote work.
Different tools for different situations.
Exactly. And interestingly, data suggests NHR was quite sticky. Something like 59% of the original NHR beneficiaries were still living in Portugal after their 10 years were up. So it did seem to attract people who stayed long term.
Interesting statistic. So wrapping this up, it sounds like the key lessons from the NHR experience are understand the specific rules that apply to your income, file everything correctly and on time, plan your move and structure well in advance, and keep meticulous record.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And always check the official sources, the Portuguese Tax Authority, Finance's website, and brochures, and get personalized advice from qualified local professionals. Don't rely on forum hearsay.
Wise words. So as Portugal sunsets the broad NHR and perhaps pivots to more targeted incentives like the new R&D one, what does this shift tell us? What does it suggest about the future of global mobility programs and that constant balancing act governments face between attracting global talent and investment and managing local impacts like housing? Something for you to think about until our next deep dive.